people ask me all the time, where did we come up with the idea of designated drinks? And it started back when I quit drinking. I was only drinking kind of pop and coffee and soda water and that type of stuff. And I kind of stayed away from anything remotely close to beer. And we ordered a HelloFresh pack one day, one of those pre-made where you cook the meal, and it came with 2 Heineken Zeros, sort of as like a bonus. And I was a little bit apprehensive, a little bit nervous about it. And my wife, Chris, mentioned or said to me, she's like, just try one. It won't hurt, just give it a go. So it was a summer morning or summer afternoon, and I sat out on the back deck and cracked it and drank it. And I thought, oh man, this is amazing, right? So, and that was just 1 Heineken Zero. And I had the second one, within an hour or so after. And it kind of like triggered something. Chris mentioned, she's like, it's really cool that you and I can have a beer out on the deck. And again, I had a bit of a problem with drinking, and we could have a beer together on outside and kind of all that stuff. And that moment kind of started something. It sparked something. And then, of course, a few days later, we were out grocery shopping, and I just happened to wander through the non-alcoholic beer section, right? So, and at that time, that we're going back to kind of 2021, there was a few options. There was Bud Zero, of course, there's Heineken Zero, there's PC Blonde in Canada, and then there's Partake. And so I thought, well, might as well try out Partake and see what it's all about. I'd never heard of it up until that point, because again, as a beer drinker, you never go down the non-alc section. You drink regular beer. So I tried Partake, and I think at that time they had a red, an IPA, and a blonde. And so I think I got a 4-pack of each. Brought them home, drank them, thought, holy shit, like this is pretty awesome. This actually tastes like beer. And now, just a little sidebar. I stayed away from beer for a couple years. And so when I reintroduced non-alcoholic beer into my diet, my kind of taste buds have lost the taste of alcoholic beer. And I promise you, like, non-alcoholic beer tastes like beer to me, because it's been so long since I've had a beer with alcohol in it, if that makes any sense. So the journey continued. I drank some Bud Zero. I kind of threw in some PC Blonde. It's like, at that time, it was like $8 a 12-pack. It was super cheap. And I find that many people that are customers of designated drinks, they talk about how inexpensive, how cheap PC Blonde is. And that first summer, it would be going back to the summer of 2021, I noticed while I was drinking this stuff, while I was drinking non-alc beer, especially the macro stuff, I was getting a headache. And for those of you who have experienced a hangover, and more importantly, if those of you who have drank non-alcoholic beer, the last thing you want from a non-alcoholic beer is a headache, right? So I noticed just, that summer I drank 2 or 3, at dinner, after dinner, that type of stuff, and I get a bit of a headache. And that headache kind of made me explore a little bit deeper on, why was this happening to me? But one day, and this is sort of the birth of the business. One day we were at Farm Boy, and we were wandering through the aisles, and I came across a brand called Sober Carpenter. I looked at the can, and like so many people do, they look at the can, kind of chuckle at the name, and I grabbed a few. And they had a Sober Carpenter Red, a Sober Carpenter Blonde, and a Sober Carpenter IPA. I grabbed 2 of each, brought them up to the cottage, sat down, and cracked them, and poured them in a glass, did the whole ritual. And I'm telling you, holy shit, I had that moment. I had the blonde, it was amazing. I had the IPA, it was hoppy, it was bold. And remember, it had been years since I had like a craft beer, and my taste buds retrained themselves. So non-alcoholic beer tastes like beer to me. So I was just in this like nirvana heaven. And again, Chris sat down with me. I was drinking this stuff. At that time, she was still drinking regular beer. And I could have a beer at the cottage all of a sudden. So not only had I found some great flavors, I had discovered non-alcoholic craft beer. The Bud Zero and the PC Blonde kind of filled that everyday type of beer, the after work beer, so to speak. And that's where I thought the journey would sort of stop. But it kept going. I thought, like, what else is there? What else is there? And my friends and family were very supportive on my choice to drink this stuff because, again, I could socialize, I could have a drink and not feel the effects of the alcohol. But there was a bit of a kind of a disconnect between availability and like kind of a supply problem. And it was at Christmas, like the Christmas of 2021. My mother-in-law wanted to buy some non-alc craft beer, and I think she was meaning to buy some Partake, and she couldn't find any. It was nowhere to be found, and we were sitting around, and Chris, like Evan, my mother-in-law's husband, mentioned. He's like, Mike, you have a background in e-commerce. I think there's like there's something brewing. There's something coming with non-alcoholic products. I think he must have read an article or something over Christmas, and he's like, what about if you take your knowledge of e-commerce, morph it into kind of a beverage distribution company, just sort of a small little side hustle. At the time, I was still working at Fanshawe College. Why don't you should try it? And so we kind of ate our dinner. I had my blue Partake. We got home, and Chris and I were hanging out, and I said, what do you think of that idea? What do you think about starting a beverage company? And she just sort of chuckled, and I let it sit. I let it sit and kind of mellow for weeks and months. And I understood the power of branding. I understood, I wanted a good name. I needed the domain to be available, and that's sort of a whole side story. But whenever you start a company, you got to make sure that the .com domain is available, and certainly in Canada, the .ca. You need the Instagram handle. You need the YouTube handle. You need all this like back end infrastructure to support the brand, right? So nabeer.com wasn't available. I think it had been taken. So we needed to have a memorable name. And that kind of sat with me, like I said, for a few months. And, I keep bouncing the idea off of Chris as far as like, hey, we should start something, we should start this company. But we could never come up with a name that was memorable, a name that would stick. And so literally I woke up really early, like 5 o'clock in the morning, with the name of the company in my head. And that name was Designated Drinks. And I got up, ran to the computer, started doing some searching on whether or not the name had been taken. And in fact, it wasn't. So later on that day, I said to Chris, she was off to work, and when she got home, I said, I think I got a company name, and it's Designated Drinks. I think we should do this. And so she's like, well, just buy the domain, park the domain, buy the domain, and we'll see where it goes. And so that's where the whole thing kind of kicked off. The name of the company came to me in a dream. From there, I started doing some more research on, what the hell I need to do to get into beverage distribution. We didn't have any warehousing. We didn't have anything. We had nothing. And the first company I reached out to was Partake, and I just sent an email. And again, the company didn't even have a website at that point. I just needed to send out some feelers on like what was involved. I sent an email to Partake, and the first question they asked was, do you have a loading dock? And of course, we didn't have a loading dock. We had nothing. We had just this company name. And that was sort of the start. We needed a loading dock. I planned on just starting it in the garage, but we needed a little bit more infrastructure to handle the weight of the beverages, right? So a pallet of beer is 100 cases of 355 milliliter cans, or about 80 cases of the tall boys. So roughly 2,200 pounds per pallet. So we're talking big, heavy like skids, pallets of beer. And we were sitting around having a Saturday morning coffee, and I said to Chris, I'm like, I'm gonna search around, see if I can find a spot, some sort of warehouse with a loading dock. Let's try to get this thing going. And I hopped on the internet, hopped on Google, and literally just Googled like storage unit or warehouse with loading dock for rent, and a company called Storage Works came up, and it happened to be like 3 minutes from the house. So we hopped in the car, drove over to Storage Works, and the lady at the desk was like, yeah, we have a loading dock right over there, and it was beautiful. We have storage units available. And at that time, there was just a small storage unit, I think it was a 5x10 unit. But if we committed or booked that storage unit, we could have access to the loading dock. And at the time, I think it was about $120, $120 a month, no contract. We could have a unit, loading dock, and the girls the ladies at the front desk would accept packages. So we could get a truck of Partake or a pallet of Partake delivered to this place. The driver could put the pallet in the storage unit, and we had something. So that was sort of the first challenge kind of checked off the list. We had a spot, we had a loading dock, and we could start accepting beer. Okay, so then we go on holidays, we go on vacation, and we're in Florida, and I started sending out some emails. We didn't have a Designated Drinks email set up. It was just sort of through my Hotmail account. And I just sent out feelers to a bunch of breweries that I could sort of figure out that they're making this stuff. At that time, Athletic Brewing was around. Who else? One for the Road, Sober Carpenter, Partake, Perth Play was being made, Triple Bogey was being made, and off the top of my head, that was sort of it. We wanted to make sure that we were a Canadian company. We wanted to make sure that we supported Canadian brewers, Canadian makers. So that was on our checklist, our to-do list. We wanted to be Canadian. We wanted to focus primarily on the Canadian market. But at that time, there wasn't a lot of options in Canada. There was a few, like say 10. Again, being down in the States, I sent some feelers out to some U.S. breweries. They were super receptive to the idea, but the challenge with importing U.S. brands into Canada is there's a labeling difference. So in Canada, we have to have bilingual labeling, like metric labeling, and the nutrition placard, that little black and white calorie label thing, is different in the States than it is in Canada. So I talked with a couple companies down there about potentially running a Canadian label. And again, at that time, we hadn't even sold a beer yet. I couldn't commit to that type of volume to make it worth everybody's while. So that idea sort of died. Athletic Brewing at the time had just introduced 2 of their products into Canada. They had put paper labels, or like the plastic labels, on their Run Wild and Upside Down. And so they said, oh yeah, we're good to go. It was coming. They had, I think it was warehoused out in British Columbia. So we had Athletic Brewing. That was the only U.S. brand that we had kind of lined up so that we could legally sell U.S. products because they had that bilingual labeling. From there, we brought in Triple Bogey, as I mentioned, and Perth Play, Sober Carpenter. They committed to selling a half a pallet. So they had 5 different SKUs at that time. So we had 40 cases of Sober Carpenter. We had 10 cases of Triple Bogey. I think we had 10 cases of Perth Play. Graham at One for the Road Brewing, I contacted him. He and I had a great conversation really early on. And he sold me also 40 cases. So basically we had, say, 100 cases in this little storage unit, and the business was live. That's where I'm going to end off. That's the start of the journey. This is what the YouTube channel will be about. Basically, the history of the business, where we're going, how we even started with this crazy idea. I will backtrack. I will bounce around. It'll kind of be like this interesting little biography / business insight on non-alcoholic craft beer in Canada. So I hope you enjoyed it. I plan on making more of these, and cheers.